Hey everyone, this is Stephanie O'Brien of Coach Client Connection, and today I'm here to talk about public speaking. Have you ever had a time when you were on a high stakes presentation for your business? Maybe you were doing a webinar, maybe you were up on stage, maybe you were doing a masterclass. You were trying to sell your coaching program, you're going in with high hopes, hoping you'd get so many clients, and it flopped. You felt awkward, you felt nervous, or maybe you felt like you did everything right, but you didn't really get clients from it. So I know the feeling. It sucks. That's why I brought in Milo Shapiro, an expert in public speaking and persuasion who can help you to ace your next presentation, get an A instead of Z, and get some clients for your next presentation. So thank you very much for joining us, Milo.
Happy to be here, Stephanie.
So could you tell me a bit about how you got into this? So how it led you to start helping people with public speaking?
Sure, especially since you're helping people get into coaching. That's kind of interesting because it was so backward. I was doing team building events using improv games, which is my background in improvisation. And that led to people saying, "Oh, you should do this with bigger crowds, not just little groups like the team building, like a motivational speaker." So I got involved with the National Speakers Association and became a motivational speaker. And that became the bigger part of my business, almost like 80-20. And after doing that for a while, I kept getting people who came up to me after my speeches and saying, "Would you work with me on my speaking skills? Would you come in and work with my staff?" And I kept saying no, like most people do when they don't realize they have something they should be doing. I was like, no, no, I had years of Toastmasters and I learned a lot from National Speakers Association, but I've never been helping other people. And one guy kind of begged me. He was in a tough position. He was selling on QVC network, and they told him he wasn't selling enough, that he was terrible on camera, and they were going to cut him if he didn't sell a lot more next time. And with a couple of weeks' notice, they told him this, and he came up to me, and I said my usual, "I don't do this," and he said, "Please do." He said, "I just if I had even a little of what I see you doing on stage." So I said, "Well, okay." And he showed up with a stack of VHS tapes because this was 2004, and we watched three episodes of him on QVC. And I said, "We can stop. I can see what you need and what you're doing wrong." Yeah. We worked together maybe only about three times, went back, and he sold out his entire product line in 5 out of his 7 minutes. They didn't know what to do with 2 minutes of dead air. He was selling plants, and they actually sold 2 minutes of plant food that he did not have with him. They had to ship it really fast. So they were selling it before they even had it, but he could get it. And afterwards, they said to him, "Oh my gosh, you were completely different on camera. What did you do?" And he said, "I hired a speaking coach." Now, I wish he had given QVC my business coach. My business card. I would have been set for life in that one probably, but he didn't. So I'm still marketing myself to the average other person who wants to improve their speaking the way I was able to help him. That in just a short time, we figured out what was getting in his way and how he could be more effective in getting a message across. And when the audience liked him, suddenly they were buying plants from him.
Yeah, that is a really good illustration of why it's so important to master these public speaking skills. What
Yeah.
are some of the common mistakes that you see people making when they're doing their speeches?
Sure. I'm going to get away from sales for a minute, just give in terms of presentations in general. One of the things is they do a lot of setup. They thank the audience for coming and isn't it a nice day? And by the way, did everybody turn off their phone? You have 9 seconds by studies have shown to grab their attention, make them decide if they want to listen to the rest of the speech or not. And most people just flush away that first 9 seconds. So instead, you have to have an opening line that makes them really want to keep listening. Whether you're jumping into a story, whether you're giving them a challenging fact, something that right off the bat makes that happen. So how do you take care of all that other stuff? You make sure you're introduced. And a lot of people don't even think about that. And if there's business, hand that off to the introducer so you can come out and hit them with something right off the bat that makes them go, "Whoa, Stephanie's talking and I gotta listen." It's just a simple little thing that makes a huge difference because you can see people looking at their phones sometimes by 20 seconds in. And
Mm.
probably the worst way I ever see people start, and it's so common, the agenda. No one in the history of speaking has ever excited an audience with an agenda of all the things they're going to cover today. That should have been in the email to get them to come to the meeting in the first place, if it needed to be. And worst case scenario, wouldn't it be horrible if you didn't know what was going to come until it came? Let there be some surprises. So don't lay out everything. Instead, pull them in and just continue to pull them in until they say, "Oh my gosh, was that 25 minutes? It flew by and I took lots of notes." And then they'll know what the agenda was. So that's a few of the things that come to mind.
So with that agenda, I'd actually like to expand on that for a little bit.
Sure.
So, where would you say the line is between getting them hooked, getting them excited about what they're about to learn, and over explaining the agenda and losing them?
Well, there's really no reason to explain the agenda at all, other than a sentence or two. So after grabbing their attention up front and transitioning into what is it we're going to be covering here, you end with, so today we're going to be looking at why we blah, 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 and how we blah, 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 blah. So they go, okay, that's the summary of what we're going to accomplish, but they don't need to know all the steps. To be told. So for about 15 minutes, I'll be looking at this aspect of your relationship with your parents. Then after that, I'll be looking at your parenting skills. Then just move into talking about their parents. Toward the end of that, go, now that we talked about your parents, what's going on with you? How are you doing parenting? Oh, is that the next section? Okay. I didn't need to know that 15 minutes ago. I would have assumed that it's going to be in the kinds of things that are coming in a program that when we hit that part where I summarized in a sentence or two what we're going to accomplish today. But the surprises are actually nice to not know quite what's coming next.
That makes sense. And it kind of, I imagine, helps people to pay more attention when they don't know what's coming next. So there's that
Yeah,
suspense.
yeah, yeah. Even in the handouts, sometimes gotten handouts to the point like I don't know why I even need to listen to this now. Am I really going to take notes? Well, it's kind of what's on the handout. So my handouts have fill in the blanks. I don't see it very often, but it makes people think, oh, what's that point? I don't know what would be in that blank. And they listen with an intention of filling in the blank. So now they're active, not just listening, not because they don't want to miss one. People really hate to miss one. And then they'll come back and they'll line, I missed number five, whatever. But it keeps them engaged. And it's a way of making sure they don't miss anything by the end. But I'm not just handing it to them. They have to be active in the process.
That makes sense. And I imagine that's especially helpful with exercises, where you're actually helping them to fill in those blanks for their business or their speaking
Oh,
or.
sure. Yeah.
So, speaking of helping them to fill in stuff, how does improv tie in with your methodology in your current line of work?
Sure. Improv comes in two very different ways. One is when I'm improvising, and the other is when they're improvising. I'm going to start with the latter. Sometimes I will see someone who I know will benefit from one of the hundreds of improv exercises that I learned. I've been doing improv for over 30 years. And I'll say, we're going to try something. We're going to try the big exercise, or we're going to try the master exercise, or different ones that I think will bring out something to them. Now let's apply that back to what we were doing with the speech. And sometimes that really makes a difference. In fact, I've had some people where I've just ended up meeting them in person, and most of what I do is on Zoom. But if they happen to be where I am in San Diego, and taking them through some ones that you need to be in person for to bring out stuff about creating character, to bring out stuff about pacing, and there are just different games that do that. I couldn't get into the specifics here. But the bigger way that improv makes a difference for me is me doing it. For me to be able to listen to something someone's saying and say, let's stop for a minute. What if you said it's something like this? And I just go for, 30, 40 seconds. And I can't tell you how often someone says, oh my gosh, it's like you were in my career. You've never done this before, and you just explained it better than like anyone in my office. How did you do that? I'm like, it's improv. Last night I made up a song on the spot on stage. Talking about your business is pretty easy by comparison. And then of course they say, can you say that again? And that's always the one where I go, I can
Oh
say it
no.
close. I didn't know you were going to like it because sometimes it takes me two or three tries, sometimes not. But there's also techniques, of course, nowadays with technology to record the whole thing and play it back if we want to.
Yeah, it
Sometimes I do,
definitely
sometimes
helps.
I don't. So it really does come up for me where I have to be able to think on the fly and adjust, especially if somebody says, I don't think that's the direction because da 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 da. Okay, I have to use the yes and technique. She just said this. I have to say, great. Now that I know that, I didn't know that before. What about this? Oh, yeah, that would do it. I mean, one of the biggest things I have to get people over is the idea that when people say to me, well, that's not how it usually sounds around my office. Oh, really? How much do you enjoy other people's presentations? Oh, I hate them all. Well, why don't we not do that then? Some professions are just very stiff, but that doesn't mean people want it. It's just the example they've seen. IT jobs, healthcare. I find that the presentations they bring to me are very staid, STAID, not STYED. They're just the same old. And it's not that hard to keep them professional, but make them more interesting. And it takes some guts. And then they always come back and go, oh my gosh, everybody loved that. How can we do that again? I was like, okay, you just had to get the guts up to do it the first time.
Yeah, I imagine that's a kind of an art form, finding that balance between entertaining and engaging and professional and factual.
Yeah, and I never go far enough that I think and they'll say, "Are you sure that sounds professional enough?" And I'm like, "Totally does. I've seen other people do things like this, and the audiences loved it, and they got their message across. You're just not used to seeing it or doing it." But I would never give anyone advice that I thought was going to cross that line. The only thing I might do if it was a particularly playful setting, then I might go, "Do you think you could get away with this?" and follow their yes or no on that. Like I have one of my clients who does a lot of retirement parties. She's in the military, and sometimes she doesn't know the people, so she can't go quite as far. Other
Mm.
times she knows almost everyone in the room and the person who's retiring, and I'll suggest something. She'll be like, "Oh, he would love that. That would be great." And so I just have to feel it out with Ellen to see if that's going to be appropriate in that case. We had one time, and this was probably the most outlandish thing we came up with, where we came up with a top 10 list about the person retiring, and they brought out a drumstick set. She doesn't play drums, but she would go bump between each of the items, and it cracked everybody up because they knew she couldn't play drums. And someone had a drumstick. It cost nothing. They just had to bring it out, and everybody said it was one of the most memorable retirement programs that they'd had because usually most people just gave a long list of, and we're very happy he's done this, and we're so proud of him for this, and the audience is keeping themselves awake with coffee, like you are. No, I was
Oh,
just
don't worry,
teasing.
it's just water.
Okay. I didn't really think you were falling asleep.
Are you sure?
Get A's, not Z's. I got to work
Yeah.
on. I got to pick up my energy here, which is actually a trick. Sometimes, if you feel like you're losing your audience a little bit, opening your eyes a little wider, making eye contact with one or two people, there are things you can do to kind of wake them up. Reference someone's name in the room. That always, for something, if you say, for instance, if Patty were, everyone's like, "Oh, why is he picking on Patty?" Well, I'm just using her name, but it wakes everybody up that suddenly it's about them and not generic.
That's smart. I like that.
Simple but
So,
effective.
so speaking of advice, you've mentioned to me that everyone has their strengths and weaknesses as speakers, and you tend to, tailor your coaching to bring those out. Is there any general advice that you find yourself giving more often that, fairly universal to everyone?
I'll come up with a couple. The first one is more stories, less data. If you're telling me that you can't cut any data to share stories, you're probably sharing too much data. And it should be two meetings. It should be a simpler topic. It should be things that you can email after the fact as follow-ups with data. But our brains can only fill with so much data before we're tuning off, and then you're missing the rest of the program.
Mm.
But if you're backing up your data with a story, then great. You should be using the phrase, for example, a lot more than most speakers do. I have watched an entire audience of shoulders go, oh, just like, oh, good, she's going to put it in context now when they hear the phrase, for example. And then a story doesn't have to be 10 minutes. A story can be 20 seconds. But just to be able to say, for example, I was working with a woman last week, and when she tried doing da 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 da, she found that there was a longer list of people at the end of the program buying her books. That's a story. It wasn't once upon a time. It didn't have a whole big, rise and fall to it, but it's a story that makes someone go, "Oh, I want people buying my books." Okay. So that's one. The other is in pacing. A lot of people are given the bad advice. You should be using pauses in your speech. So they put them all at the ends of their sentences. And it sounds really rhythmic to say, we should all be more effective coaches. Wait, wait, wait. Coaching can make a difference in people's lives. Wait, wait. What are you waiting for? That's not where the pauses go. What we learn is where do they go within the sentences to create anticipation, to create pacing, to give people's brains a time to absorb things. There's an unconscious, and you'll notice this once you're aware of it, there's an unconscious belief that the ends of sentences are more important. So what we do at the beginning is to build up to that ending. And a lot of people start conjunctifying, is what I call it. And, but, so, and, but. I had to tell a client recently once that she didn't finish a sentence for 2 minutes. She said, "You're kidding." I said, "Nope. Your first 2 minutes were all one sentence." When was I supposed to feel like I got a point from any one of those things you were saying when it all felt like so and it all felt like it was preface to those things,
Mm.
and just something she probably never would have been aware of without the coaching.
And I
And
find
conversely, we have people who it's all choppy sentences, and I need to show them they have to show cause and effect by adding a so here and there. That's usually the long sentences, especially men. Men are long sentence oriented.
And I find like as a listener or as a reader, if there's a really long run-on sentence that I have to hold the whole thing in my mind simultaneously in order to understand it, it's definitely more mental work. Yeah. When it comes to
Yeah.
pauses, though, as a listener, one thing I really liked what that one speaker did that just about nobody does is he knew how to use pauses to let you take notes. Like if he wanted you to write something down, he'd say, "Okay, bro, write this down." Says it
Yes.
again, and write it down. It says it again. Give you enough time to actually write it down, so you're not trying to multitask writing down with listening to the next thing because you're gonna partly fail at one of those probably.
He did something that was very, very smart that takes away the awkwardness. It's awkward to pause and feel like I don't have to start talking again. They're going to get bored. They're going to wonder why I'm not talking. But by telling them this is something I want you to write down, he gave himself permission to pause long enough to do that, which gave their brains a chance to catch up. It gave him a chance to breathe. That's another one I have to tell people is the first time I said this to someone the other day in a networking meeting because she was there hoping for feedback. I said, the first time I noticed you breathe was about 40 seconds in. That's too long. And so she was picking up pace because she was trying to get enough in with that air. So since you don't want to be gasping and you don't want to have awkward pauses in places that don't accomplish anything, once we learn the right places, we can breathe and we can relax and we bring more to the table that way.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And so, speaking of you're talking earlier about telling stories. How does improv relate to developing their signature stories?
Oh, an interesting question. Didn't see that coming. Um, I'm going to answer by being less improvising, which is I try to write down every day. I have an Excel spreadsheet, one story from the day that I would have forgotten about otherwise. So I don't know if I'll ever use it for anything. But then when I look back on it, I can look at patterns. I can go, oh, that does relate. Especially if there's one in particular, I'm like, I got a laugh when I told that story, or that was a day, something that really stressed me out, or it had an unexpected twist to it, or it had a sentimental ending that I didn't see coming. And you just start building up a list. And then you can spin them different ways. There's a story that I tell in my keynote called Public Speaking Get A's, Not C's, if I'm booked at a conference, that's about my grandfather. And I open with it. The first sentence out of my mouth is not about public speaking. My opening sentence is, I had the privilege of knowing my grandpa Harold for 37 of his 94 years. And people are like, what? His grandpa? What? And then they want to hear the story about what happens in the restaurant as we get into that story, which I can't share now. But one of the things I point out to them, I tell that story and then I use that story to teach from. And I say, now I spun that story in a certain way. So it was about communication. But if I had told it from my mother's point of view instead of my grandfather's point of view, it could have been a customer service, a project management story, or from the restaurant owner's point of view, it could have been a customer service story. So I can spin a story different ways just by the way I tell it. I'm not lying. I'm just telling it with a different way of focus. And when you have a bunch of good stories, if I have 10 good stories, I can spin 8 ways. I'm ready for 80 situations. And I want
And
more
like,
than 10. I'll build them up over time. So back to the question of improv, I think improv teaches us not so much about improvising, but it teaches us how to recognize what's going to work, what I can try. A good example is I was out with one friend, Robert, and we ran into another friend, Jordan. Jordan said, anything happening today? And Robert said, no, we're just running some errands together, spending some time. I said, well, there was one kind of funny thing that happened. And I shared a story about a woman in front of us in the line at Pick and Save who had a whole cart full of cat food and a problem she had with the cashier. And Robert just keeps giving me this funny look while we're talking. And afterwards, he said, I lived through that same moment and I didn't think it was an interesting story. I said, oh, are you saying that I bored Jordan? He goes, no, you found the interesting in it. He said, it was more interesting listening to you tell it than it was living through it myself. He said, because I think you inherently see life as an interesting place full of stories. And so the more you start to look at your life as a minefield of stories and a bouquet of stories and a garden of stories, you can start collecting them. And I think the improv mindset makes you say, was that one of those moments? Improv also gives you the ability to change things on the fly a little bit. Sometimes I realize I need to tell this story in 40 seconds, not the 3 minutes I thought I was going to. Can I do that without running out of time? And improv has taught me that.
yeah, I could definitely see that being valuable from stories to elevator pitches. It has,
Oh
how
yeah.
do people develop that mindset of seeing the stories in everything?
It does take some practice, and I think the writing exercise of saying every day, put down one story. Another thing I've heard about that exercise also is that it slows down time. You ever feel like, oh my God, where did this week go? I could swear yesterday was Monday and it's Friday. Well, when you're stopping and doing something special about each day, what was it? Then all of a sudden it's kind of like time slows down. Like, no, I actually had a lot of experiences in that time. Another thing you could do is when you're in the course of your life and you repeat a story or you share something, watch the reaction of other people. If you get an uh-huh, that might be not one of those stories. If they're laughing or they're asking more questions, or you find out they told someone else that story, you might have more of a story on your hands than you think. And a really important one is the climbing Mount Everest stories, the time that you were saved by the paramedic stories. Those kind of stories rarely make good signature stories, even if they can market themselves well in it, because your audience can't relate to it. There's nothing about climbing Mount Everest that I can relate to in any way. I don't even like going, if there's snow out, I wouldn't go outside. I just would. So let alone climb a mountain. But tell me about a time when you embarrassed yourself in a public place. Tell me about a time that a client challenged you in front of other people. Tell me about a time when you had to, and I'm see, here's me improvising now. Tell me about a time when technology let you down and you had to find a way to back up your situation at the last minute. I'm with you because I've been through all those things. And I'm like, oh, what did you do? Oh, what happened? And and how I can relate to that and put that into my life, and how I can be more like the message you're sharing makes me want to buy into the rest of that speech and possibly coaching from you in your case.
Yeah, that relatability is really important.
Yeah. And
And
people
one other,
undermine it.
oh, go ahead.
We all have everyday stories, and yet we don't think they're worth sharing, but that's exactly what people will relate to.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And so, on the subject of speaking advice, I know there are lots of people out there who give speaking advice, like say Toastmasters. So, as I understand it, you differ somewhat in how you recommend framing a speech versus, say, Toastmasters. So, could you give us some examples of what differences there are between your methods and those of other well-known speaking or speaking
Sure.
experts?
Sure. Um, I mean, the main difference between working and coaching with me and Toastmasters before we get into the what I teach is, I mean, I love Toastmasters. I was with it for years, but I joined Toastmasters not because I needed to be a better speaker. That was back when I was in IT and I didn't give any presentations. It was something to do on my lunch hour, and there was a club downstairs, and it was something fun to do. I enjoyed it. But I've had people say to me, "Hey, I have to give a speech in November. Do you think I should join Toastmasters?" And it's June. I'm like, "Yeah, you should join Toastmasters 5 years ago, but you didn't. So that's not going to get you there now." I mean, in a Toastmasters club, you're likely to speak every sixth week, and then you're working your way through their programs, doing your little 5 to 8 minute speeches with them through their book. And it's lovely. It's wonderful and you will grow, but you're never going to get to practice your 30-minute business presentation there. And a lot of your learning is going to be osmosis, watching other people and hoping you glean things for yourself from them. And sometimes you're getting feedback from people who joined the club after you as compared to working with someone who's been doing this for 25 years. So it's just a different experience when the whole hour is dedicated to getting you where you want. And you were saying also earlier uh, about helping people be the best them they can be. I don't want to turn anyone into Martin Luther King or Tony Robbins or me. I've got to be able to look at them, and this, you don't get this in a class or in a Toastmasters, and say, these are the things getting in your particular way. And these are the things that are great about you that if we can accentuate them and play within that, you're going to have your own style and have people saying, I want to be more like her. Not I want to be a better speaker. I want to be like her because we made her the best her that she could be. And everybody is different with that. I had two people call me in the same day from the same company. And when Dave called me, I could tell in 30 seconds, oh, I know what bland, boring. I can
Mm.
imagine if he's like this on a phone call, how is he in a presentation? So we were going to work with him on style and energy and uplifting and getting some stories to break up the data. So that was what Dave was going to need. A few hours later, when I got a call from Tina in the same company, lively, bubbly, exciting. I could just got a great feeling here right off the back, and then it went downhill as I realized she never makes a point. A million tangents all over the place. I bet I could see why her boss told her you need to get fixed on this. And so for her, it was all about structure and recognizing tangents and how A, to avoid them, and B, to recognize when she was on them, to get back around, to work from bullets that she was not doing before so that she could get back to her points, and planning out timing to end on time. So I don't see where you're going to get that in a Toastmaster setting or in a classroom setting. And a classroom setting is going to be one size fits all. So you're going to end up creating programs like what's already out there. Because of the improv background, because of my storytelling background, because I'm involved in storytelling competitions, I help people find different ways of looking at it. And when I ask a question, can you tell me about a time when da 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 happened? And then we draw that story out, and then we move that to the beginning instead of the agenda that they probably had there. Um, it just shapes differently. You can't get that unless you're working with someone who has gotten to know you, gotten to know your business, and can see the forest for the trees, and is looking and is rooting in your corner for you.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You're having something that's that customized that so many people, like you said, have different weaknesses, different strengths.
Yeah.
If you want to get really fast results, it is important to get that tailored, intense, personalized attention instead of a few scraps of attention here and there every few weeks.
Sure. I mean, much as I love the book, I still say to people, I'd sure rather you work with me than read the book because I have to make the book. I'm proud of the book. I wrote it because I didn't like most of what I was seeing on the market. I thought it was kind of boring. I was having trouble getting through them myself, and I liked the topic. But there wasn't any way to write the book to help both Dave and Tina in the same way. So I had to try and find that middle ground. And the other thing about the classes and Toastmaster settings is we haven't talked about the fear of speaking at all. I'd say 50% of the time I pick up that phone, the words fear, scared, anxiety, nervous come up before I ever have that chance to ask them, how's your fear level? They're bringing it up. So we make the terrible mistake of assuming that if you know somebody, if you know your topic and you know English, you should be able to do this. And no, it's not. There's a lot to know, and very few of us were ever taught how to do this. So we're going to cure that, but we try and teach people in a group setting. Well, you're learning public speaking, you should learn it in front of people. No, you should not. That doesn't make any sense at all. Let's get you away from the crowd, show you how to do it one on one, being able to stop, joke around, pace ourselves according to you. And then by the time you're good, then you get in front of the audience. And what I find is more often than not, my clients are now excited to try out the new stuff rather than scared. And as they get good feedback, the fear level keeps going down until it's just energy. Because we don't want to completely kill all the butterflies in our summers. We got to draw from that energy a little bit. So it's okay. I don't think I've ever gone on stage without a little bit of butterflies in my tummy, but I'm fine with that as long as they don't fly out my mouth.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's been a while since I read it, so don't quote me on this, but I seem to recall reading some sort of study where when people talked about what they feared most, death was actually ranked below public speaking.
Yep. But that was number one, public speaking, and number two. And they've shifted around a few times. Terrorism got in there for a while, but public speaking is always way up there. And it makes sense that it would be because we're not shown how. So we get up, it doesn't go well. We sense that it doesn't go well. We reinforce, oh, I'm not good at this. And then we have to do it again. Well, now the fear gets worse, and people talk about panic attacks, and it's kind of unfair because we usually throw people up there instead of starting really simple. This should have been drilled into us every day of elementary school, getting up and presenting, but there just isn't time. So we get to high school and suddenly we're thrown into it.
Mm.
Or worse, first time in the job market is the first time we're doing it. Job interviews. I will not coach people on what to say in a job interview. I always have to be careful because as coaches, we should always have our lanes. So I will say when people call me about job interviews, I can help you to sound clear and interesting and dynamic and likable. But what answer HR is hoping to hear in some cases, that I should refer you to. Because I know somebody who focuses on interview skills, but he helps them figure out what answers. How to come across is a whole different thing. Likewise, if someone lisps, stutters, mumbles, has trouble making certain sounds, I refer them to Laura for that because it's good to know who I partner with. And then sometimes she'll say, someone came to me because they have a speaking program. They wanted to get over an issue about their speaking or accent reduction, but then they come to me afterwards to work on being a better speaker once they're a clearer speaker.
Yeah, it's smart and I appreciate the integrity behind it. Yeah, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I've got my lane, I've got my things that I'm good at, and I can help with certain steps in the journey. And then I have to refer to other people for the step before or the step after, or to do some cleanup before they can be ready for me. So yeah, I
I don't
appreciate
think
that
it's
you have that integrity.
Yeah, and I didn't always. I think we all have made that mistake on occasion of saying, "Oh, I shouldn't have been doing this. I wanted so badly to help. It was with good intention, but it isn't my area of expertise." And luckily, I've been in the business long enough to have come across people that I can refer to and feel good about, because it's certainly the appropriate choice to make for the betterment of your client.
Absolutely. We're
And
getting
develop a
close
good
to
business rapport too. It's always nice to, to feel like we make a community of coaches instead of being out on our own.
absolutely. It's so much better to be able to say, I don't do that, but I know who can, than just, sorry, I
Yeah.
don't do that.
And the flip side of it is I love networking with business coaches and life coaches and especially executive coaches and saying to them, hey, if you ever come across a client who either has a big speech coming up, or maybe they have that weekly staff meeting and they just know they're not good at it, or there's a sales presentation they have to go out and give and they're watching people look at their phones every once in a while during the
Mm.
presentation. They're not connected. They're asking questions afterwards you thought you covered. Send them my way and I will work with them on that. And then when they ask me the business question, the life coaching question, the executive coaching question, I'll say, I don't know. That's not my area. Go back to your original coach. I can't steal your clients because this is the only thing that I do. And it's the thing that I love doing. And I brought but this might sound braggadocio, but it's not. I brought so much joy to so many people's lives because they come back and I see that joy that they did it and it worked and they were excited and they got feedback. One woman I knew came to me. I coached one woman on her book tour, and the woman who came on after her in the book tour said, I hate following you because you're so much better than me. And Jen said, I wasn't. I worked with a business coach. So then Dory called me, worked with Dory on her book about China. She's now speaking on cruises off the coast of China.
Oh,
And she
wow.
said, I didn't get through the first cruise before they booked me for a second one because they said the audiences are actually showing up and coming back. Usually we see trailing off. Your audiences are getting bigger as the word spreads on how interesting your talks are. And Dory wasn't bad, but she's a lot better now.
Neat.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're making a big difference for a lot of people, and we're close to the end of our time. So I want to make sure that you can keep on making that difference with the people who are listening. So if someone in the audience is thinking, "Yeah, I need this guy to help me nail my next presentation," what's the best way for them to get a hold of you or to take the next step?
Sure. The best way is just to go right to the website you see up here, publicdynamics.com, learn a little bit more, reach out to me through the contact page, and I always get back to people within a day or two.
Awesome. And yeah, for those who need it, I'm also going to have that link in the show notes. So whether you're watching on my blog, on my YouTube, on my social media, it's going to be there in the description or in the post. So it'll be easy for you to click to.
And really quickly, it works so well on Zoom that I'm Zooming with San Diegans now. I'm not meeting anyone in person because this works better. Not only does it help work translate beautifully to in person, but when we learn on Zoom, it works for Zoom. When we learn in person, it doesn't help us with our virtual programs as much. So learning on Zoom kind of covers both.
Not to mention it saves a commute.
Yes, it's much easier.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Milo. I really appreciate that. Anything that you'd like to say to the audience in closing?
Just don't avoid this. I've seen so many people who, when they work with me, said to me, why didn't I do this 15, 20 years ago? It would have made such a difference in my career and in my confidence. And then they start saying to me, oh, this opportunity came up that I didn't see before. I'm like, yeah, you didn't see it before. It wasn't that it wasn't there. Now that you're comfortable, kind of the world is your oyster a little bit more. So it's a wonderful gift to give yourself.
That's a very good point. So, yeah, thank you again for sharing your expertise, for sharing your actionable tips. I'm sure we all got some good nuggets we can take to our next presentation. Yeah, and to everyone who's watching this, thank you very much for tuning in. I encourage you to reach out to Milo as to make sure that you implement the advice he just gave. I hope you all create an amazing day.